With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350 plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Hey, Howard.
In case you need a lawyer, here's my business card. I'm attorney Howard Ankin.
Oh, hey, Howard.
If you or someone you know has been hurt at work, Ankin Law can get the medical bills paid, the lost wages reimbursed,
Oh, hey, Howard.
and the compensation you deserve.
Hey, Howard.
We're one of the largest filers throughout the state of Illinois of workers' compensation claims. We're here to help. Call 312-6-million. Injury law made personal, that's Ankin Law.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Robin. Welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Wednesday night, January 21st, 2026. As we bring you a new show, yesterday's episode, we had the unexpected Luis Robert Jr. trade news break during our recording, and in this show, we'll be recapping what went down as Robert is now a New York Met, and the White Sox are hoping that Luisangel Acuna can fill in at center field. We'll talk about why this trade happened the way that it did, especially in light of Cody Bellinger now returning to the New York Yankees. Did Chris Getz' gamble pay off for the White Sox? And now that he has $20 million freed up in payroll, what's the best way of spending that money in free agency? First, Chris Getz spoke with the White Sox media, including our James Fegan, Wednesday morning. The New York Mets have been interested in Robert for quite some time, but their circumstances in addressing their outfield changed in the last 48 hours.
They've had interest in Louis for a while. They have. I would say, yesterday morning is when they felt like they were at a decision point. I don't know what else they were working on. I've got a good relationship with Dave and Stearns, and when you sense urgency and something's real, you usually want to engage on it. Yesterday morning it picked up. Over the weekend we had some discussions as well. I know they've been active in the free agent market and been able to convert on some moves, and perhaps they've missed on some players as well. You never know what's going to affect the market, but this weekend is when they at least connected with us, and then yesterday morning I felt like it was about to get pretty serious.
Several teams had interest in Robert during this, I guess, tenure as far as trade talks go. More than a year. The Cincinnati Reds, the San Diego Padres. So why did Getz feel like a deal with the Mets was best?
It really is about being able to bring in Acuna, getting access to him. And, we're talking about a player that's 5+ years of control, one of the younger, exciting players in our game, hasn't really gotten a runway at the major league level. We have opportunity here, and we can provide that runway to show off his talent and his ability and his ceiling, in which, the industry has been very high on this player for a long time. We've been tracking him for a long time. When you're assessing the player, obviously you go through your scouting process, your analytic process, and you come to a decision. But to be able to bring in a young, exciting player that plays all over the diamond, a strong defender, an elite defender, elite base runner, can make contact, is very strong instincts for the game. I know over in New York, talking to individuals over there, they did not want to get rid of him. I know that. And that's because of how valuable he can be with the team. Now, he was on a roster that didn't really allow him to go out there and show what he can do on a regular basis, in which we're going to be able to provide that. So to get a chance at bringing in a player like that, and, gain some more flexibility with moving Louis, seemed like something that we needed to strike on, and we went ahead and did that.
Luisangel Acuna, Ronald Acuna's little brother, is in the mold of Lurie Garcia, a bit undersized at 5'8", and his offensive struggles early make it difficult to project him to be an everyday starter. But as you just heard from Getz, the White Sox believe that Acuna can be a two-war player and have eyes on Acuna playing in a lot of spots on the field, but maybe most of his time will be in the outfield.
Defensive projection, he grades out above average in all places, including center field. He's been playing center field in Venezuela. I think it's probably close to 15 or so games. He's plus, maybe even plus in every infield position. And I would imagine in time he's going to be plus in center field if he isn't already. But the beauty of this is the versatility. We've got Chase Mydroth, Colson Montgomery that have moved around different positions. Obviously, Colson's our shortstop. Chase has played a lot of second base and shortstop. Acuna can play in all those positions. To have someone that can fill in if someone goes down, if when you're looking to optimize your defense, he slides in pretty much anywhere on the field. So just to have that valuable piece is going to make Will's job a lot easier and optimizing a lineup on a regular basis. So, you look at, the next 5+ years with Acuna, hopefully on our club, you're looking at a guy that can play in any of these positions. He's played the most at shortstop and second base and has showed elite defense there. But the ability to really move other guys around with his ability to fill in everywhere is extremely valuable for us.
The White Sox outfield as we sit here is Acuna, Brooks Baldwin, Everson Pereira, Derek Hill, Andrew Benintendi, and Jared Kelenic. Not exactly the most promising group of outfielders. Still, the question has to be asked if Getz feels comfortable with what he has currently on hand.
Yeah, I just think in general, we're going to be very active. I look forward to getting to the office today and make some calls to agents and other clubs, an opportunity to be really creative, with the flexibility that we have. So now you look at our outfield, like the defense with Pereira and, Acuna, those are really strong defenders. I think to be able to add to that group, both offensively and someone that can play defense would be a way to improve the club. But there's different ways to get there. There's different ways to add value to your club. It doesn't have to, you don't just need to break down certain, pockets of the team. And it's really as a whole, a 26-man roster, if not a 40-man. But we plan on being very active. We've already been talking to agents and clubs and anticipate a roster that's going to continue to evolve.
James Fegan got a chance to pick Getz's brain on how he feels about Acuna's offensive game and ponder what's next.
Hey, Chris, it sounds like the way you're talking about Luisangel that you kind of intention of running him out there every day, or at least something close to that. Where do you kind of see his offensive projection if he gets that type of runway? Is because he's someone who, has big time bat speed. Obviously, we've seen, the bursts of power in Venezuela pretty recently, but hasn't necessarily had a ton of in-game, home run production, at least in the majors. What do you kind of see the potential if you kind of give him, 500, 600 plate appearances a year?
Well, it starts with some swing adjustments, but that he has been working on. I know at the end of the year in New York, he and the coaches and their head of hitting, they were working on, some swing adjustments, some swing changes that allowed him to get the ball in the air a little bit more because he had heavy ground ball tendencies. And they started to see those strides, and then he's been able to take that into Winter League in Venezuela. Now, that's not always an automatic that it's going to translate. I think we can all acknowledge that. However, there are some indicators that he is, he's headed in the right direction. And, once again, you put that on top of the fact that he's going to come to a club where we can give him those consistent at-bats to test and get early feedback on those adjustments. And if he needs to make more, you continue, you rinse and repeat. That's the beauty of our situation here. Most of his value right now is certainly the defense, the elite base running. He's got contact ability. He's shown the ability to to hit. It's just a matter of getting the ball, hitting more line drives. He's got some power. We know that can be dangerous for some, but really find that balance for his overall offensive production. Our marker oftentimes is, does this player have a pathway to at least become a 2-win player? And, we feel like Acuna, based on, the defense and the base running, and with this offensive skill set, if we can increase his offensive skill set, we got a guy that can go 2 wins or more.
Do you see any benefit? I mean, obviously you've been operating with it for the last couple of years of not having the specter of Robert trade rumors hanging over, both him, Luis, for him personally, or even just kind of the team, of kind of building something, but also having this, prominent guy who's seemingly maybe not a part of the long-term picture. Does handling this in the offseason, do you see some benefit to that?
I think so. We can just go out there and as a team and focus on getting better and winning baseball games. I can't speak for every player and how they, manage rumors that are swirling or any sort of, and how they internalize that. That's everyone kind of deals with that differently. But I think if you ask most players, 95% of the time they would like to know where they're going to be for a season. And in Robert's case, he now could put that behind him and go and play in New York.
And you mentioned being very active. Are there, you mentioned outfield. Are there specific areas that you're kind of targeting over this final month for camp breaks as far as what your priorities are for adding?
All areas. I know, when you move on from a Louis Robert, there's this assumption that, a certain position needs to be filled, but it's increasing talent on the team to help us win ball games. That could come in starting pitching, relievers, balancing right-handed versus left-handed. So we're very open-minded and, excited to get to work and being creative and bringing in that talent.
Finally, Getz did address the chances of Braden Montgomery opening the 2026 season with the White Sox.
With players like Braden, obviously a super talented, high-engine type athlete that can play all 3 outfield spots. He's got power from both sides. He's only continuing to get better. He's shown that, once he got up to AA and finished in the AFL, it was really, really trending in a good direction. Coming into spring training, I want him to come in and compete for a spot. I do think that at some point he could come into the mix. So we're open-minded. We always are with young players. But I just want him to go out there and focus, be the best player he can be, because it's really about the long term for Braden Montgomery and the White Sox. It's not about Braden Montgomery making the opening day roster.
Flowers die in 3 days. Matching underwear from MeUndies, that's a gift that lasts. MeUndies creates matching prints for couples and friends. Same adorable designs and different cuts for each of you. All made from their signature ultramodal fabric that feels impossibly soft. With 90,000 5-star reviews, MeUndies matching prints are the perfect gift. Valentine's Day is February 14th, so don't wait. Get exclusive deals up to 50% off at MeUndies.com/SXM, code SXM. That's MeUndies.com/SXM, code SXM.
Looking for a Valentine's gift she'll truly love? 1-800-Flowers.com knows what she wants. For 50 years, 1-800-Flowers has helped guys like you get it right, delivering millions of fresh Valentine's roses nationwide. 1-800-Flowers offers premium fresh-cut flowers backed by their 7-day freshness guarantee, plus same-day delivery when you need them on time. Valentine's is coming up and bouquets are selling fast, so don't wait on this. Order today at 1-800-Flowers.com/SXM. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/SXM.
Joining me now on the Sox Machine podcast is beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. And hello, gentlemen. Before we get into what's next for the White Sox after trading Luis Robert Jr. to the New York Mets, I think we should take a moment to ponder what Robert's legacy is with the White Sox. To recap, 6 seasons with the White Sox, 577 games. Of course, his rookie year was in 2020, the shortened season. He had a 15.8 WAR, according to Baseball Reference, during his time with the White Sox, a 767 career OPS with the White Sox, with as many home runs as stolen bases, 102. He made the All-Star game once in 2023. He did beat Adley Rutschman in the first round of the Home Run Derby during that All-Star game. Robert won 1 Silver Slugger. He won 1 Gold Glove. He only had really 1 complete season, which was in 2023. And he was really good for the White Sox in the postseason, both in 2020 and 2021. He went 11 for 28. James, you wrote about Robert's legacy on SoxMachine.com. How would you sum it up? His time with the White Sox.
I mean, it's funny because you're reading off his stats and his averages, and he's like, he was pretty good. Like he's a pretty good player. And I think being more removed from the emotion of needing the team to win or wanting to be like the certain level of productivity to be happy, like it was really cool to watch. Like I would say your average, like if someone, especially when he was productive, like still didn't like really enjoy watching Yasmani Grandal, whose like value came in kind of like dull ways to like observe, I would get it. But like Robert, even Mercurial, even last season when he was, a below average offensive player on average, like he could take over games. He could look the part. He would look like a superstar at times. Like, their best season, 2021, like he missed half the season in a way that became frustrating, but he was awesome. He had like over 3 wins in like at less than a half season of playing time. You could, for a lot of people who consume the team in a kind of like a television show that's on during the summer, like he was probably your most regular supply of just entertaining moments. Like he was a fun, toolsy player to watch. Their home runs he's hit, their diving catches he's made that I like were, kind of holy shit moments to watch from the press box. Like I enjoyed having him around, but in his way, while his still overall numbers look great, there's obviously these big swings in it. And I think because we know how good he's been and the type of season he's put together, at least a couple points in his career, he does fit in that overall feeling of like disappointment from like what the expectations were, partly because the expectations were just set like the way they talked at points were just like, we're going to become the Dodgers more or less, in terms of like thinking there was going to be perennially competing for championships. And if that was to be the case, it would probably be because Luis Robert would become a perennial MVP candidate. And that obviously didn't happen. We have the one All-Star season that kind of stood out, and it was for a team that was at least the second worst miserable watch of the 300 loss seasons they're in the middle of at this point. And the way that his value has been, and like the past couple of years have all been Luis Robert trade talks. So it's been kind of this referendum and way to like talk about like, it's hard to divorce the feeling of how valuable his tenure was from how valuable a trade asset. So to see it kind of go out in this depreciated fashion where it's really just another post-hype prospect and kind of somebody who, if you asked around the industry right now, the outlook would be like really high-grade utility guy, or like, Lurie too a little bit with maybe some more exciting tools in some ways. It feels a little bit underwhelming compared to like what you could have felt about Luis Robert at his highest highs, where it's just like, this is a monster who's locked up for years to come, and instead he leaves after 6 years of service time. Like, you kind of get trained for all White Sox stars to leave until proven otherwise at this point.
Jim, the White Sox made a big investment in Luis Robert. Since the last opportunity they could, spent as much cash as possible to outbid the St. Louis Cardinals to sign Luis Robert when he left Cuba. And then the pre-arbitration contract, a lot of money went to Luis Robert. Was the investment worth it?
Yeah. I mean, I think if the White Sox, if Chris Getz had the opportunity to get a Luis Robert 2 on the market for the same cost, like he would do the exact same thing. Maybe Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't greenlight it this time because it didn't quite pan out, but I think it'd be the same idea of just, he has superstar tools. He plays an up the middle position. If it pans out, we will get all-star production for as cheap as we'll ever get it. Maybe we'll have a chance to get a couple of team options as well. So yeah, I mean, like they had to do it at the time they did it because they couldn't afford his skills otherwise. And I think it's just an easy yes. I was trying to think of like who, if there was any better athlete to play for the White Sox, like in a way that produced, like there might have been like some, like great 3 sports star that didn't hit for the White Sox, but as somebody who produced and actually had some staying power with the Sox. And I can't think of like a better athlete. Like Dick Allen, I think would be a popular choice because like of just the hitting ability, and he was a great base runner, but he played first base. Like he was not a center field, gold glove center fielder or gold glove caliber center fielder on a routine basis. But like, yeah, might come close, but in terms of like outfielders, and and James brought up Larry, and I'd been thinking of him for a different reason, but like Alex Rios is probably the best combination of power and speed and the ability to play defense, although he could really only do it in a corner. He is more of a hit tool than like a raw power guy, but in terms of production and where they ended up in the wins above replacement neighborhood at their best, like he might be the closest, but I would still take Robert. So yeah, I mean, it's rare to get that kind of athlete. It's unfortunate that, got to the point where every time like he ran really hard, he just were holding your breath. And like, I think that like the John Schriffen, audible heartbreak response, oddly might be Schriffen's finest moment of his career in terms of just like doing a good job of capturing fan reaction and the sentiment of watching it without going overboard. That's, I think it kind of played a knife's edge of just like pushing the human body to its limits when it came to like running hard. I'm not sure why he broke down as often as he did. Like, he's not the fastest guy in the big leagues, and everybody seems to be able to run max effort and not have hamstrings or hips go out on him the way that Robert did. But yeah, it felt like he was just almost a prototype that wasn't necessarily, greenlit for mass production because like it'd fall apart in the wind tunnel or something like that. But that's what it looked like. There's a chance that he could go off with the Mets and have another, capture the stretches he showed last season or have another 2023. But, just as much like it could be a case where he runs really hard in spring training and misses 3 months. So it's, therein lies the rub. But yeah, just in terms of raw athleticism and how he was able to capture it in ways that were very, both pleasing to watch and also, production in terms of raw power, home run distance, ground covered in the outfield. I can't think of somebody who was better at both sides than Robert in terms of just what he's able to do with his body.
We talked about it over the time with Robert with the White Sox, Jim, that our fear was that Luis Robert would be the modern day version of Eric Davis back for those great Cincinnati Reds teams where Eric Davis just put up like video game numbers and had all the tools. And that was Robert when he was on. And I loved having those conversations, like who is the best center fielder in the American League Central, because the Central's got two of the best in Byron Buxton and Luis Robert. And Buxton, for the most part, has lived up to it, but he's had his own injury history as well. There have been times that he could not play center field to avoid injury. So I don't know. I think Twins fans are probably happier overall with what they have seen from Byron Buxton in his tenure with the Twins. Whereas, is it safe to assume White Sox fans feel a little underwhelmed, Jim, with the Luis Robert tenure? Like, there should have been more.
Oh, yeah. And I think he would be the first to say it. He only had one full season. Like he had two good seasons, but only one of them he was around for it for the vast majority of the game. So I think, just when it comes to availability, that would be a case where he could not say that he played enough for the White Sox. And you could see the frustration mount. And I think, as the struggles to stay on the field and then like the production stopped being great when he was on the field, I think that's when you saw like emotion from him, frustration, often, most times through an interpreter, but just, admitting that, it's at first it was, quality, but not quantity. And then like the quality dropped off too. So it's a disappointment. But, given everything that he went through, it's also a case where just the athleticism was such that even when he was struggling, like James said, he still managed to pull some incredible games out of his, just out of nowhere, like we saw with, him in PNC Park in person, just seeing him. And I don't get the opportunity to see many games in person to where like I'm tracking him from the minute the ball hits the bat and I'm looking to see where the outfielders are and seeing him close like he can close when his legs were cooperating. Yeah, it's a breathtaking athlete, and I think it's part of it's the language barrier too, in terms of like how Buxton can connect with Twins fans, whereas Robert really couldn't because of just like he's not going to be speaking for himself and speaking with a full range of emotions that whether it's because interpreters simplified or because interpreters cover for him in terms of correcting the language a little bit. There isn't necessarily that direct channel to fans. Also, you're seeing Buxton right now, over the course of the last couple of years, say he doesn't want to be traded and speaking what it means to be with the Twins. So he's really appealing to Twins fans emotionally. But yeah, I think they're similar. It's just a case where I think Buxton signed the extension, a bit later. He's been hanging around longer. But I don't think the comparison is that far off.
And now Robert with the Mets, he doesn't have to be the star. I mean, that team is loaded. And 5 minutes again before we hit the record button, ESPN's Jeff Aston reported that the New York Mets added to their starting pitching staff. They have acquired Freddie Peralta from the Milwaukee Brewers to add to their starting rotation. So the Mets have been busy in the past week, especially in light of the Dodgers signing Kyle Tucker. So the Mets are not fading as far as this offseason arms race against the Los Angeles Dodgers. So why did this trade happen for the White Sox and the whole process? Well, on the show Foul Territory, former White Sox catcher and team ambassador AJ Pierzynski had this to say about the Luis Robert trade.
Here's my thing with this whole trade. Listen, obviously as a White Sox fan, I'm happy that Luis Robert is gone on this year's team because at $20 million, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when your payroll is like $80 million to have one guy making a quarter of it.
Yep.
Now their payroll is down in the 60s, and the Chris Getz said that they're going to be allowed to spend that $20 million. So why did you just not release him before the season and not pick up the option? And then you have $20 million to spend for the whole offseason instead of 2 weeks or 3 weeks before spring training starts when the free agent market has already been picked through. Right now, will they actually spend that $20 million? Let's find out. I don't know who they'll go get. A starter, a reliever, whoever they want to, an infielder, an outfielder, whatever they think that they need. Now they have $20 million to spend. Let's go see if they use it. Right? But to me, this should have maybe happened after the 23 season when he was really good.
Now, James, in my attempt to answer AJ's question and explain Getz's rationale, if the White Sox had declined Robert's option at the end of the season, back in October, they would have $18 million on hand because they would have to pay the $2 million buyout, but no prospects. Whereas now, after trading Robert, he gets to shed $20 million off the payroll, and he gets to add a couple of prospects. Was that always Getz's intended goal in trading or entertaining the idea of trading Luis Robert? Is not only do I want to shed this payroll, if a team's willing to meet my asking price, I need to get prospects back.
He said they generally considered some scenarios where they would eat money if that would affect the return. It doesn't sound like that vaulted them to some sort of different level of like aspect prospect here. I certainly didn't hear them connected to anyone like really who blows away Acuna in terms of value at any point. So even if like that wasn't a straight like we shed all the money and we got prospects in return, I think they generally thought they would get to a place that was better or more value added than just simply cutting ties. And I think it kind of more or less bore out that way, like as much as the way he termed it. And, to kind of take everything at face value, it obviously sets it up where it looks like the Mets blinked rather than the White Sox blinked. And that can be kind of a, favorable narrative, but he presented it as like something clearly changed with the Mets approach in the last like 48 hours. And that kind of triggered things. And that led to Acuna being on the table for them in a way that they thought was acceptable. That lining up with Bellinger signing with the Yankees less than a day later really kind of fits the idea that they got an answer on maybe another outfield pursuit. And with that, went to action on this one. Obviously there's a lot of smoke with the Reds in the past, and it's not like this is like the White Sox are necessarily sitting around twiddling their thumbs with this as the only option. And thank God the phone rang. But it certainly sets up like that they were waiting for something like this. The outfield market was thin and eventually some crunch would happen. And sure enough, it did. And I don't think the fact that it happened in late January versus like November, especially for the White Sox, because they weren't in on Bo Bichette. It wasn't like they were 20 million shy of, being in some sort of like marquee free agent market. I think the price here they're shopping at, the targets they'd be looking for, I think it's more or less still there. I like they'd have to really be shopping near the top for this to have been something that really hamstrung them in some way. Like, I think what we're talking about freeing them up to do is like sign a number 4 starter or another like strong side of the platoon outfielder. It's not this major grand plan of the offseason that was like lying in wait. I think pretty much any scenario where they weren't just holding the bag with Robert at the deadline again, like on the IL and with a 76 WRC plus, they can kind of be like, all right, it at least was worth doing. This one at least seems, I don't know how the people of the Rmova feel about Robert being scratched in the lineup, Sox Fest, like 10 days ahead of time. But as far as like entering the season with a clean idea of what the team's going to look like, and even just doing right by Luis, this seemed like a more or less happy ending. And, relatively, given that we're talking about trading away a young player is supposed to be the foundation of a winning team, and instead it's 3 straight 100-loss seasons. And everyone knows the story here.
Is it as simple, James, to follow up that if the Mets had won the sweepstakes for Cody Bellinger, Luis Robert probably still is with the White Sox?
It certainly increases the likelihood. I don't think we can say it's like an either or, because there's like something else could pop up that creates a need between now and even like God knows, like spring training injuries where it can be a factor in markets, or was something that seemingly affected the Dylan Cease market like adjacently at that point. So I think you can't predict baseball to that degree to just make it a hard to ask statement. I know that kind of plays easier, but it would increase the odds for sure. I don't think it's a only oasis in a desert type of situation necessarily.
And I get AJ's point, because now here you are in late January, Jim. Okay, you got $20 million. The free agent pool is pretty shallow. Like, if Chris Getz was able to make this trade in the winter meetings, again, you'd be like operating this vacuum. I'm trying to understand AJ's point of view in this particular topic, Jim. If that in the winter meetings when we were in Orlando, Robert gets traded to the Mets, maybe then the White Sox could win the Peter Fairbanks sweepstakes, and they sign a closer for $12 million. If we're wondering, why would you do that? You gotta get the ball to them. There's a lot of questions there. Same old White Sox. That's really the only thing that I could think radically change if Chris Getz was able to make this trade sooner, as far as realistic free agent targets for the White Sox. But this was always a gamble by Chris Getz. We talked about this in last trade deadline. Like, it was this idea that if you are truly going to pick up his option, I don't know how many teams would actually spend $20 million on Luis Robert in free agency. Lo and behold, the Mets are willing to take on the deal because it's Steve Cohen, and money doesn't seem to be a factor for the Mets owner. So did Chris Getz's gamble pay off in the end by trading Luis Robert and getting prospects back?
I guess it did. I would say technically it paid off in that he did not have to pay Luis Robert for his services in 2026, and he has a player that he didn't have before. So I think by definition, he won the gamble. I think with the Mets paying full freight, I think it's mostly because Acuna is out of options and because he's blocked all over the place on that roster. And so, like, they could probably find a utility guy who does the job just as well. So, sure, why not cut him loose? He's never going to reach his full potential. If he needs reps at the major league level to be anything more than a fungible bench guy, then it would need to be somewhere else anyway. So they may as well acquire Robert, who, like we talked about before, like Michael Conforto can make $16 million in a year. So can Robert on a 1-year deal, just to see like if he can stay together because of just the defensive value alone. Gives them such a head start. So I think 1 year, $20 million cleans up a roster spot that, they had some odd fits for. So it makes sense on both sides. And I think that's why, especially when it was $18 million decision for the White Sox with a $2 million buyout. It was easy to see like why it happened. I think, you've talked about how, the White Sox need a president of baseball operations or somebody to better sell a vision for the White Sox. And I think maybe that's what Pierzynski's getting at. Because when they signed Murakami and Robert's still on the roster, you're thinking like, okay, well, now you have a little bit of variance to this thing to where if, Murakami has a really smooth transition to the majors and Robert recaptures 2023 and Montgomery and Teal pick up where they left off and keep building on, great rookie seasons. And now you have some of the pitching depth showing up. Like there's a chance this team could be like make a run at 500, which is not, still a ways away, but just a welcome sign of progress after 3 straight 100-loss seasons. And you kind of get lulled into that. Okay, I see what Getz is going for with this, variance and, establishing a foothold in the Pacific Rim and, selling some jerseys and some interest and just like, okay, there's a little bit of recognition. There's a little bit of potential and a little bit of like novelty. So that's better for marketing. So then to take Robert out of that and talk about like, all the years of control that Acuna offers and having the smallest payroll and not being able to use that payroll space and anybody who's going to transform the roster. I think that's where you get back to like, okay, so is this team trying again? Is this team like, is 70 wins going to be a major triumph? And after 300 lost seasons in a row, like that feels flat. So, you can understand what Getz is doing at the baseball level with all the changes that he's made, but it hasn't yet amounted in anything that's really entertaining as a product, as something to follow, as something to kind of hang your emotions on over the course of a summer. It still feels kind of adrift. Perhaps they're 1 year away from doing that. We'll see what happens like after the season with the lockout and the CBA, et cetera. But it just feels like, God hopes this is the last year where there is no direction or no win total they're pushing towards. And I think, 3 years of this makes it very hard to like, at some points looking at a major league team and saying like, like, are you trying? Do wins and losses even matter to your bottom line? I wish there were relegation, et cetera.
I will say there are some within the White Sox organization that probably agree with AJ Pierzynski as far as his criticism towards Chris Getz of like, we cannot always be rebuilding. At some point, we do need to start winning, or I don't know what we're going to do on a business side because attendance has not been good for the Chicago White Sox for too long, and it will be hurting their bottom line. So I definitely get that perspective. I think as far as like this upcoming outlook, the infield has a chance to be average. The starting pitching, if Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith take a big step forward, okay, you have a good front three that you can dream on. This outfield, I think the nicest way I could say is it's still a mess. Like this, we could be witnessing the worst White Sox outfield of our lifetimes with the way that it's on paper right now. And I'm trying to be nice by saying the worst White Sox outfield, not the worst outfield ever. But unless some of these guys really step up, unless Acuna's performance in Venezuela has a similar path as Lenin Sosa ripping apart Venezuelan pitching last winter and helping him hit well in the major leagues to lead the White Sox in home runs and be a league average hitter. I just don't know how much playing time Benintendi's going to be able to do in left field. I don't know what the White Sox really have in Everson Pereira. They have this split contract with Derek Hill. Brooks Baldwin many times last year seemed lost in the outfield. Acuna looks lost at the plate. And then you bring in Jared Kelenic, and everyone can say it's just a minor league contract, but I think he's got a serious chance right now of making the team. That's your outfield. That's what the White Sox have on hand. And behind them, we haven't even talked. I don't even know who the Charlotte Knights outfield is right now. And that's why Brady Montgomery gets brought up, because it's like, it's him. That's all you got right now in your farm system for outfielders. It's Brady Montgomery. If you're drafting by need, I'm going to go on a rant here, podcast listeners. If this was the NFL and you were drafting by need, the number one pick would be an outfielder. Like, the White Sox need outfielders. At some point, you just traded away your best outfielder. You still need outfielders. So when are you going to address the outfield? When are you going to address right field? How long have we been bringing this up? It's been a decade. It's like, does this organization care? Anyone in the front office? So I get AJ's point of view. When it comes to the outfield, I totally get it. But I think there are other parts of this team that you could definitely dream on. I'll be focusing most of my attention on being positive. Like, hey, the infield could be good. I think that there's potential here on the starting pitching side. Let's see what they could do in the bullpen, if they can develop relievers, if Grant Taylor could be an elite, high leverage type of guy. I think there's areas to be dreaming on where I'm not as dour as AJ Pierzynski is with the team until you bring up the outfield. It's bad. So with that being said, podcast listeners and Sox Machine commentators and those that follow us on social media, I posed this question to James Fegan and Jim Margulis. Suddenly, Chris Getz has got $20 million freed up in payroll. What is the best way to spend that cash, James Fegan? How would you do it in these last couple of weeks before spring training?
Like specific players or just?
Sure, or if there's anyone that comes to mind.
Generally just like, I mean, like recent stuff, rumors about like Michael Conforto or, the first suggestion on my starter piece way back when it was like Zach Littell would be the sort of like innings eater they pursued. That, would be fine. It wouldn't be great. I would point out like 2024 outfield was -2 WAR combined. 2007 outfield was -2 WAR combined. So I think, the outfield doesn't look great, but for the non-goldfish among us, there's other more recent examples that they'd have to really they can be replacement level and not get to where they've been in the past.
I know what you're saying, James, but I don't even have confidence they can reach -2 WAR. Like, below that. Like, that's how concerned I am. Like, they would go through the floor.
Like, I'd be curious, and this might be a post just looking at like their projections, like in recent years, just like, their preseason projected outfield and like how they met. Like,
Sure.
This might be the outfield that projects the worst that they put out there.
Like, but it'll project the worst, but will they play like Kevin Sheets, like 100 games out there the way they did in 2024, or pick up Corey Julks and give him like 200 plate appearances to rack up -1 WAR all by himself? Like, that's kind of stuff that they wound up doing that wouldn't really even be captured in projection systems. Like, are they just kind of situated to churn through options maybe better than they were like when they were first being started out? They're kind of depths that you avoid sinking to with just like proper, personnel management. Like, looking back at 2007, like how that got so bad. It's 140 games like Jermaine Dye, like not being able to play right field and just kind of putting him out there anyway. Or Andy Gonzalez did an incredible amount of damage in so little time.
3 error inning.
Brian Anderson, Ryan Sweeney. I think just like competence would get them out of like -2 WAR. Like, and that might evolve to counterpoint really long window for Josh Palacios last year that probably didn't help them like avoid that. That's at least a lesson ideally they would learn from and not kind of ride something or be exposed so that they'd have to put out something where they're just kind of substandard. And really like talking to like people around the organization, especially at the end of last year, in modeling the Brewers, something they really picked up on is like they don't have the biggest stars, but like they go to their bench or they go to their depth and they don't like fall apart. And it's not having these long stretches of Jacob Amaya or Vinny Capra. And that's at least stuff that they were aware of at the end of last year that really killed them, is having these long stretches where they had to go to somebody who like was sub replacement. So even beyond like making this depth chart look a lot better, hopefully in a little time, which at least he's pledging to, I think just better like personnel management or going away from options that like truly aren't effective more quickly. And I think they've been working the waiver wire pretty regularly. They just need to expand it beyond Rays players a bit and they'll be golden.
Rays and Brewers players. If you are the Rays and Brewers, you get put on waivers. The White Sox will be calling. The best remaining free agents, according to Fangraphs, Framber Valdez is still a free agent. Eugenio Suarez, that'd be kind of fun, but I don't know where you would play him. Zach Gallen has got a qualifying offer attached to him. I really feel bad for him at this stage. I don't know how that's going to work out. Chris Bassett, old friend, is a free agent. Zach Littell, Luis Arise, and then Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer still want to continue pitching. Bless them, as they're both older than I am. And then Harrison Bader is also still a free agent. Any of those names intrigue you, Jim? You got $20 million. How would you spend
picturing like getting Verlander and Scherzer on this team in the same rotation.
Signing Scherzer and having Acuna will allow you to win the Mets-Rangers trade out of nowhere.
Yeah, just tie them together. That they'll give you one question in spring training, and then like neither of them have an opinion on it, and awkward silence afterwards. Lucas Giolito's still out there, right? I'm just thinking for content purposes. For good both baseball related and non-baseball related interview topics. Like I could see that one being good for Sox Machine, so I'll put that one out there in the universe. But
it'd be great for 80 innings and like giving episode recaps of like Pluribus.
Yeah. So I would say that's probably for us the best possible use of that money.
Okay, so Lucas Giolito.
Or Scherzer and Verlander together.
That'd be awesome. Just why not at this stage? I'm surprised both of them are still free agents. The Verlander, as far as Fangraphs, his contract estimate $15 million, Scherzer $12.5 million. So maybe one or the other, but I can't imagine if either of them would sign with the White Sox. But then again, I'm a bit surprised that Harrison Bader, who had a pretty solid season last year, is still a free agent. Like, again, with this whole outfield situation, if you want to buy time, I think that could be a logical pick. Fangraphs' estimate is 2 years, $24 million, so $12 million a season. And then Zach Littell is also at 224. It's definitely an either or situation for Chris Getz, or at least he makes it sound that way. Like they're not able to afford both Zach Littell and Harrison Bader. If the asking price is correct, if Fangraphs' estimate is on target, and both want $12 million a season, I kind of feel like Zach Littell makes sense, James. I know you brought it up a while ago, but behind Shane Smith, which he's entering his second full year starting pitching, and Davis Martin's no stranger to injuries, and the uncertainty with Sean Burke and Jonathan Cannon, until a lot of these starting pitchers come back, the White Sox could use an innings eater to go along with Anthony Kay. I think Littell would make sense. Maybe that would be the way that I would go, is to help out with the starting rotation.
Yeah, I mean, they want to add another starter. I think they probably feel like they're just enough right now in terms of like, you'd have Burke and Cannon like fighting out for a spot or something like that, or giving really a long leash to Newcomb. But as far as like actual like depth to start the season, knowing that you won't have, kind of depth starters like Adams, Bush, or Thorpe until like maybe more mid-year, they need another arm and someone who like, I think Littell's, it's worrisome because it's, the park factors float around a lot, but I generally don't think like guarantee rate field is where we think like a high contact, homer vulnerable pitcher who gives up fly balls is going to thrive necessarily. So he's both like a little bit like pricier as far as like their outlays, but with the potential, if you can find any sort of tweak that improves the slider performance, which from last year, which really dipped, or gives them something that mitigates the fly ball damage a bit, just like has been healthy, throws a lot of innings, just throws a ton of strikes. That kind of is in the bucket of what they've been searching for, like the last couple of years. Like that kind of generally is what Martin Perez was. It kind of fits with what they have said they needed or want. It's someone they can kind of like trust to go 5 or 6 and protect the young players, as they put it. So it's not probably game one start of the World Series unless things really break in some way. But it seems like their sort of market which it is discouraging. I know for readers to be like, have me explain why this person's underwhelming or how like they're likely a utility player, but that's kind of what they've been going for these days. But that is true. Like that they're all like, they're not just going to be paying for like proven, like we need a number two, let's pay a number two's price. It's always going to be like this person's probably marketed as a number four and we're hoping we can shape him up to a number three, or this person looks like the strong side of platoon. We hope he's an everyday guy. This guy looks like a utility player. Hopefully he's a glove first center fielder. That's just kind of where they're at in terms of their outside acquisitions that they have to pay for. It's all about like if they're the everyday stars are trying to come from within where they can acquire from cheap when they're still in high school, or 16-year-olds in the DR. That's where they take their big shots. And this middle class is more their market rates here.
If they were to sign Littell, so it'd be Shane Smith, Zach Littell, Anthony Kay, Sean Newcomb, and then one of Davis Martin, Jonathan Cannon, and Sean Burke.
I would say Martin's probably pretty safely in there, and I think it would be Burke and Newcomb and Cannon would be in that like compete for a spot sort of territory in that scenario.
Got it. Okay.
Where
Not
I
awful.
probably put Burke the leader, mostly because I talked to him today.
Okay.
He sold me on his new slider shape.
Yeah. You're easily suggestible.
So if it's between Zach Littell and Harrison Bader, Jim, where would you side out of those two options?
Probably Littell, just because at this point, given the amount of innings to cover in a major league season, given that the bullpen is still pretty open-ended at this point, I do think that this team is still in the business of crossing days off the calendar, and just, you know, and this is like year 3 of getting it over with, like getting the year over with, just trying to help guys that, trying to find guys who are part of future contenders and helping them get better, not leave them exposed to the elements if they're learning how to play the game or learning how to take on major league workloads. So I do think that like a starting pitcher probably does more than like a Harrison Bader, who's kind of uneven and like he's been up and down. If you get him on a down year, then that creates that outfield crisis all over again. So that's why I think like just options to fill out a rotation to where Burke and Cannon aren't in the rotation by default. I think that's what you want to avoid. I think you want to make one of them have to earn it. Ideally, like both would be on the outside looking in, but I think at this point, given that Anthony Kay still has to prove something, Sean Newcomb, is probably more of a reliever than a starter until he shows otherwise. I think probably Burke, the workload they carried, Cannon too, to that regard, like they're just a little bit more ready to start every 5 days. But I'd rather see one of them have to work for it.
Well, podcast listeners and Sox Machine commenters, let us know, how would you spend the $20 that was freed up with Luis Robert being traded? It's like a
$20. Wow.
$20. Sorry. $20 million. Feels like $20 at this stage.
Between $20 and Jim saying that Michael Conforto would be $60 million a year, I'm getting skeptical about how much really the White Sox can add, going forward.
Well, that was Michael Conforto last year. Michael Conforto, his price keeps getting cut in half to where.
I see. I thought you slipped him in with Kyle Tucker.
No, that was Michael Conforto in terms of a 1-year project and what, and hoping for rebound. What does that earn? And it ended up being like $16 million. So,
yeah.
Well, Chris Getz says the White Sox will be active. We'll see if they make any additional moves prior to Sox Fest. Again, that will be happening on January 30th and 31st. And of course, when that news breaks, visit us on SoxMachine.com. Follow us on social media at Sox Machine. Follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. On social media, we'll be covering it. It was a very long day at Sox Machine, but we hope that you guys appreciate our efforts and all the content that we produce to properly capture as far as maybe the biggest offseason move by the White Sox. after signing Murakami, or maybe trading Luis Robert was the bigger news item than signing Murakami. I think that's a worthwhile debate, maybe as we enter into spring training. But Luis Robert's time with the White Sox is over, and the White Sox will now move forward, and we'll see in how they spend the rest of this offseason. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You could also listen to the show and watch our videos, as we uploaded new videos today to capture as far as the news of Luis Robert being traded, James's video interview with White Sox general manager Chris Getz. You can check that out at youtube.com/SoxMachine. If you enjoy our work and you are currently not a Sox Machine subscriber, you can be one at SoxMachine.com/products. Monthly plans start at $5, and you get if you sign up for an annual subscription, you get a discount, and this is a great time to sign up for an annual subscription. Again, Sox Fest is coming up, spring training is coming up, MLB draft coverage weekly is going to be starting. You get an ad-free version of both the website and the podcast. So if you're not a subscriber, sign up today at SoxMachine.com/products. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.